Sio, Nagad? Sio. Well, one thing for sure, if there's one sport, other than obviously marbles and stickball, if there's one sport the Cherokees have excelled in, and all the way back to probably 1924, I think, is baseball. And growing up in Jay and Oak Hill community, that's all we did. Sunday afternoons. Some of you guys in here remember those times. You had teams everywhere. So baseball's always been something. I don't do it for money. And every time I have the opportunity to talk about natives in baseball, I do. Because that is the probably sport that many of us in here, 2 or 3 generations, we all speak of our uncles or grandpas on Sunday afternoons at Rocky Ford, Oaks, Sid, Little Kansas, Jay, Colcord, Greasy, Briggs, Peavine, New Green, Twin Oaks, Four Corners, Kenwood. That's where all the ballparks were. And I'm more familiar with the ones up that way, but where John's from, over toward Adair County, they always had ball. And I grew up idolizing our Cherokee baseball players. And real fortunate to be in that area. A couple of guys from my home, a couple of my kinfolk back there, we become familiar with these names. And growing up around Delaware County in Jay, Oklahoma, there were 4 names, actually 5. They all made big shot. They all made big time. And they were all pitchers except one. And we had a guy named Joe Hutchison, shortstop, signed with the Milwaukee Brewers, J-Boy. And he's back home now, retired game warden, retired state legislature. We had a guy named John Laux, another Cherokee boy, signed with Kansas City Athletics, a pitcher. Had a guy named Lloyd Kingfisher, who lives right here in Tahlequah now, and from Delaware County boy, signed with Chicago Cubs. You had a guy named Kurt Daugherty, probably not because he's a Daugherty. Kurt Daugherty, he was probably the most talented of all, yet he's the only one that didn't go on. Then you had a guy named Jim Ruho, whose picture is on the wall up there, signed with the Yankees and later on played with the Pirates. Those 5 names right there I read off, those are the names that were always, and every one of those guys signed. So no matter, and I always tell the young kids, just because you live in Greasy, because you live in Briggs, because you live in Kenwood, doesn't mean you are a good enough athlete. They're going to find you. Even more so now, the opportunity. So I've been collecting baseball cards and a couple other sports. There's no money in football, certainly no money in basketball, but baseball was just a natural sport for all the folks at home. And one of my best friends, all through grade school, all through high school, his dad owned a drugstore in Jay. So I kind of had ends on how to get baseball cards. And they were only a nickel a pack. And they had names like Pee Wee Reese, Mickey Mantle, Don Drysdale, Bob Gibson, Allie Reynolds, all those guys, all those big guys. Only paid a nickel, plus you got some gum out of there. You guys, some of you remember that. Well, he owned a drugstore, and I'd work in there sometime on Saturdays and Sundays, and I'd get paid by baseball cards. Okay, what are you laughing for? And I might have took one every once in a while, and anyway, so I had I hated St. Louis Cardinals because they beat my Yankees. I don't know how many Bob Gibson cards I hung up on the clothesline with BB guns. Oh man, now I think back, man, how stupid of me. Man, a 1964 Bob Gibson card goes for about $380 right now. All that time I shot it up. Man, I was stupid then. But I hated them because they beat my Yankees. Now, other than my pure love for the sport, other than just because it's baseball, one of the biggest reasons I do, what I'm doing today, is I get so sick and tired of sports personalities referring to Jackie Robinson as the first man to break the color barrier. And do baseball people not consider us Indian people as people of color? Are we invisible to them, or do they accept us? Well, we all know that's not true. Before Jackie Robinson even set foot on a baseball field, we had 47 Native Americans play professional Major League Baseball. The very first one, a guy named Sockalexis, and he's a Penobscot from Maine, 1897. He played with the Cleveland Spiders, 1897, only played for about 2 or 3 years, and became sick. And boy, and I even, just the very first one I speak of, I hate to say that, but it's a reality for us. A lot of our native people fall to alcohol. One of the reasons he left, but he did get injured, fell down the flight of stairs and injured, and couldn't really make a comeback. But he was so good that the Cleveland Spiders really had a good intention of keeping him on the roster, had good intention of signing him, but because of injury and a couple of other outside things, he didn't last very long. But on record, this is the very first American Indian to play Major League Baseball. There is another, and I do need to mention, but I cannot find anything in my research to support any. I'm hearing and read occasionally, I've only seen 2 references to a gentleman named Jim Toy, Sioux guy from the Dakotas, but he was from Pennsylvania, who played in 1887 with Cincinnati Red Stockings, but I can't find anything. But on record, this is the very first guy in professional Major League Baseball, 1897. Now the story on this, and not very many people, and I really wouldn't say anything unless it's chronicled, it's in the books. He died in 1913, Mr. Sockalexis. And I've been up to Maine, where he's from, where his reservation is, and I've spoken to the people, and they tell that story as well. So that's enough for me there. He died with heart problems and disease in 1913. In 1915, the Cleveland Spiders ownership and management changed the name from Spiders to Indians. And there's several references made that the reason they did that was in his honor. Cleveland Indians in 1915, when Cleveland renamed it the Indians. But of course, a lot of people around here wouldn't want to hear that because of the mascot issue. But that's chronicled, that's in there, that's in research. There's several references to that. And even the Penobscot in Indian Point, Maine, where he lives, where he's from, the reservation up there, Penobscot, they also say that same thing too. So, Sockalexis, man, I tell you what, he started in 1897, Cleveland Spiders. He hit 338, 3 seasons. As is, he quit after 3 seasons, injury. 338. That's hard to do, guys. We had people making $17 million a year hitting 311, 310, and even less. And this guy did it. He was an all-star status. Again, 2 years after he died, the story goes that he was actually given the honor of having the whole team named after him. But there's not too many references to it, and I don't know if it was by design, but there's not too much there. In 2000. Mr. Sockalexis was inducted to the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame in Lawrence, Kansas. Of course, everybody knows who this guy is. Jim Thorpe, possibly the most natural athlete we will have ever known. And he happens to be a native, a Sac Fox, not too far from here. Of course, track, the Olympics, and football overshadow his baseball. Of course, we all know that. And if there's one person that I have most of, it's Jim Thorpe. I have a huge, massive collection of football, track, and baseball of Jim Thorpe. I even got his autograph over there. And he's renowned. He's a world-class athlete. One of the things I always read about, and I've read it several times, his natural ability was displayed in football, track, basketball, bowling, tennis, golf, and boxing. If it had been marbles back in then, he'd probably been a good marble player too. But we'd invite him to Oak Hill anytime to see how good he is. So he hit over 300 in about 3 seasons. Jim Thorpe did. He was a good baseball player. He was just a natural ability. But because he was so natural, that sometimes people with natural ability kind of overdo themselves sometimes. And so he became suspect a couple of times in overrunning fly balls. He's just speed, just pure speed. And he was never a finesse player, but he played well enough to be on the squad as a utility player and used primarily as a pinch hitter because he was super fast. That's what everybody talks about. He played the outfield, and it's chronicled that he was a professional in 3 sports: track, football, and baseball. Well, there are 3 other sports that he could have been a professional in, and that's what is what I read, and that's boxing, golf, and bowling. Just a phenomenal athlete, this guy, and I've got plenty of stuff on him. 1972, he was inducted to the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame in Lawrence, Kansas, where it's at, and that's where I went to school. One of my buds back here went to school as well, and I happened to be the MC for that 1972, the very first year of American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame, and there's several others that were inducted that I'm going to speak of, but I had the honor, and I didn't have the force. I think it's more respect. Of course, none of these guys were there. Obviously, Mr. Thorpe wasn't there. His family was there, but he was inducted into the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame. Now, he's the very first Native American to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1963 in Canton, Ohio. He was a multi-sport. Jim Thorpe was also the very first president of the NFL. And now that's quite an accomplishment there. To be when it was 1920, I think, is when NFL started, and he was the very first president. A guy named George Howard Johnson. He was a Winnebago from Nebraska, Walt Hill, Nebraska. Now, he played with the Kansas City Packers and the Cincinnati Reds, 1913, 14, and 15. He only played 3 seasons as well. Stocky, strong, super athlete. In 1913, he led the Cincinnati Reds pitching staff in almost every category. And it said that if he'd been pitching for anyone else but the Reds, because they were pretty sorry, about like Texas Rangers this year, I guess, he would have been probably a 20-game winner, is what they all say. He was that good. And he's rumored to be the first pitcher. Now, this is really Indian right here. He's rumored to be the first pitcher to use what we call spitball, which is no. You can't do that. That ball goes choom down like that real fast. And the reason he did that, he says his folks from Winnebago country used elm. And it provided the sticky substance. And they didn't know it at that time. Now it's on TV. Now we know when guys are cheating. But he's rumored to be the first one. He threw 13 complete games. You don't have that no more, guys, folks. And that's 9 innings. A complete game. That's 9 innings. That's a complete game. Now, we expect 5 innings from a pitcher now. We pay him $23 million a year. He only throws 5 innings. After him, you have a middle relief guy. After the middle relief guy, you have a setup guy. Then after that guy, you have the closer. So 4 pitchers. And back in those days, these guys threw the complete game. He pitched in only 3 seasons, injury, and one of the other guys, bout with alcohol, led to his demise. So 1915, he made a comeback and reshaped, and I guess he whipped everything that was the evils with him. And he came back in 1917 with a 2.75 ERA, 4 shutouts, 17 wins. That's pretty good. We don't even have pitchers that do that now. The one thing is, the last shutout was against Philadelphia Athletics, and the guy that he beat was another Indian guy named Albert Bender, Chief Albert Bender, and I'll talk about him in a little while. And this is a picture. These guys were teammates, New York Giants, Jim Thorpe, and they called him. Of course, if you're Indian back there, it was like that when I was going to college, Chief. If you're Indian, they called you Chief. And John Tortes Myers, he's a Cahuilla Indian from Palm Springs, California, a tribe I worked for at one time. And they have a pretty good little an honoring display for him. But Tortes Myers was probably one of the best ball players in that era, John Tortes Myers. He caught for New York Giants, Boston Braves. I don't know what the heck got into him in Boston. And Brooklyn, they were called Robins before they were called the Dodgers. He played 9 years in professional baseball. He hit over 300 for 3 straight years to help the Giants win 3 National League pennants. In 1912, he hit 358. He played in 4 World Series, and he was a primary catcher for a guy named Hall of Famer Christy Matheson. He was educated in Dartmouth. He played football and baseball at Dartmouth. Was a teammate of Jim Thorpe, as you see this picture here. He returned back to the Res after pro ball and became a police officer. In 1970, he was inducted into the California Athletic Hall of Fame. And then also in 1972, 1 year after his death, he was inducted into the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame in Lawrence, Kansas. That was the second of 4 people that I got to be the MC when they were inducted to the Hall of Fame. This is one of my favorites right here. A guy named Moses Yellowhorse, a Pawnee, full-blood Pawnee boy. Big feller. I don't know if it's such a phenomenon that he was good, but I think it was just the phenomenon of having a native. And Kevin and I were talking about it earlier, plus his last name. He caught fire in Pittsburgh. He only played for 3 years, I believe. He was a cult following, is everything that I've ever read about this guy. He said he had a cult following. And the screams and yells of "put in Yellowhorse" was always. He was one of the hardest throwing guys, and it's estimated that he probably threw in the high 90s. Of course, back in those days, they didn't have radar guns. He had a record of 8-4, which is not really nothing to write home about. And but he had 2 seasons in Major League. He had an 8-4 record. You know, he really wasn't all-star status, but it was just a cult following that he had because of the last name being full blood, and I think just being someone who they identified. He wasn't like all the other players on the team, which were almost all white because there were no blacks on the team. And one story I mentioned. Yellowhorse was a target of racist taunts and slurs, as you might think. Jackie Robinson went through that as a black player, the very first one. The great Ty Cobb, everybody has heard of him. He was probably one of the most racist baseball players there was. Ty Cobb, always just, even now probably he would still rank up there as a racist baseball player. He taunted Moses to the point he ear-holed him with a fastball. And they carried Ty Cobb off the field on a stretcher. I'd have been there going like this if I'd been there. I think the only one, John Ross and Joe Bird, by the only ones here that was there, I think. So, he played his last game in 1924 with. He tried to make a comeback, you know, and he still could do well. He played in the Double-A team in Utah. Now, here's something of interest: Three River Stadium. Those of you who are Pittsburgh Pirates fans. That's a stadium they built in 1970, one of classic art. It was named Three River Stadium, but it won by 2 votes. It was going to be called Yellowhorse Stadium in this guy's honor. But the owners, people in the iron industry there in Pittsburgh, said that they couldn't do that. He hadn't earned enough. But for the people in Pittsburgh, you probably had a pretty good argument there. He was inducted into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame in 1971. And he was inducted to the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame in Lawrence, Kansas in 1994. And I have the only known picture of Moses Yellowhorse that you see over there, which is the same as that one right there. Stout looking fella, Pawnee guy from Pawnee, Oklahoma. and that's where he died. He went back home, almost just a pauper, as a lot of our athletes do. This is the first American Indian in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He was an Ojibwe, Chippewa guy, Albert Bender from the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota. He developed what is called a slider now. They called it a drop ball. He's the one that developed that, a nickel curve they called it. Albert Bender, he was the very first American Indian inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, in 1953. In his career, he won over 200 games, and which is a lot of games. He pitched in 6 World Series. He was the first pitcher ever, and still yet, I think Allie Reynolds is the other guy, to throw 3 complete games in 1 World Series, 1911. Man, that's unheard of. Maybe you get to pitch twice as it is now. But back in those days, these guys were tough. Man, these guys were hay haulers, man. You could throw a lot, and they kept throwing. He led the league in earned run averages 1910, 11, 12, and 13, and 14. And he was one of the guys that was inducted to the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame in 1972 in Lawrence, Kansas, for baseball. Okay, now we're going to start with Cherokee ball players. This guy right here, some of y'all know where Adair, Oklahoma is. That's where this guy's from. Austin Ben Tin Cup. Now, he didn't play very long. He played with the Philadelphia Nationals and the Chicago Cubs. That's probably why. Cubs can't win nothing. I'm just joking. Now, he only played 3 seasons, but Austin Ben Tin Cup was a household name as a pitcher. And he pitched in 48 games and in 3 seasons. Now, his record on the mound was 8-11, 8 wins and 11 losses. It's not hardly a winning record, but he, again, like a lot of natives back in those days, it was a kind of a novelty, and he was used quite a bit. Now, when he wasn't pitching, he was probably a better ball player as an outfielder than he was a pitcher. As a defensive star, he had a 287 batting average. That's pretty good, guys. That's almost 300. So when he wasn't pitching, he was out there in the outfield. And and he pitched, went back to AAA and won 20 games right off the bat. But he ended his career in an arm injury, and he did it hauling hay. And then that's kind of crazy. But when you're from around that part up there, you got to haul hay. And he was inducted into the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame in 1981. This next guy is also a Cherokee guy, big feller. This guy's here probably the most underrated native to play baseball. A guy named Rudy York. He's an Eastern band. He's Choctaw and Eastern band. Now, York comes from the Choctaw. That is a big name down there. He played for Detroit Tigers 1934 to 1947. That's kind of, you played quite a long time, but that's quite a long time there. 1934, he made his debut with the Tigers. 13-year career, 277 home runs. That's pretty good for a catcher because they got to get up and down, up and down. 1,152 RBIs, runs batted in. 7-time All-Star selection. 9 years, enough votes to be considered for MVP of that league. In 1943, he led the American League with 34 home runs, 118 RBIs. Man, if he had those figures right now, he'd be making between probably $19 and $21 million. 1957, he's an Alabama boy, but his mother is half, as I understand, half Eastern band and half Choctaw. He was inducted to the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame in 1957. This guy spent 10 years in the majors, and close I get, those Petties that live up in Grove, these guys back there, they're part of that bunch right there, Charlie Petty and them boys. This guy was a good ball player. Brooklyn Dodgers, Pittsburgh Pirates, spent 10 years in the major leagues. He was more of a finesse pitcher as most left-handers are. They don't really have a lot of speed. They're just all kinds of just strikeout guys. You know, they don't throw hard. They throw right where they want. And that's kind of picture Jess Petty was. He started in over 40 games, but he also was a reliever because of his ability to make the ball, golly, dance, curve, change up, all the thing they had. I can't find much on this ball player. Not much is written about it. Zach Wheat, second Indian guy in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And then this guy, boy, if you can read that from here, oh man, this guy was something else. Spent 19 years, Major League, over 2,400 games, and over almost 10,000 at-bats. And his average for the entire 19 years is .317. Man, that's great. That is good. That's why he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Of course, you know, Indian Bob Johnson. This guy's from Pryor. Now, this is one of the, boy, he talk about, and the card that I got of him is autographed by him. This guy played way back in 1933 to 1945. He's from Pryor, Oklahoma. Played most of the time with Philadelphia Athletics, and 7-time All-Star, and over 100 RBIs in 8 seasons. And he had over 100 RBIs 7 years in a row, with a career high in 1936 with 121 RBIs. Oh man, and this guy here had 288 home runs, 1,300 RBIs, lifetime batting average of .296. Indian Bob Johnson. And this is his brother, Roy Johnson, also from Pryor. This guy played the Detroit Tigers, a brother to Indian Bob, 1929 to 1938, Boston Red Sox and Detroit Tigers. He had one of the strongest arms in baseball. And you can always tell when you look at the stats on baseball players if they led the team or were second or third in put out assists. That means he gunned somebody down at second base or third base or home plate, and possibly even first base at some point. So he led the American League 2 or 3 times, throwing guys out that tried to stretch one of the hits. And when he got it, but bad thing is Roy Johnson still has a record that's been unbeaten. He committed 31 errors in 1 year. That's a lot, man. That's a hell of a thing to be known for. But he was one of the good ball players, Roy Johnson from Pryor, Oklahoma. 31 errors in 1 season. Now, that's a lot, but he still holds a record. Okay? And also a Cherokee boy. Now we got a Creek boy here. This guy was one of the most phenomenal athletes that you'll ever read about. Debuted with Cleveland Indians in 1942. He signed in 38. But his big name came in New York Yankees. He was traded to the Yankees in 46. In 8 years as a Yankee, he compiled a win-loss record of 131-60. Now that's really, folks, that's really good. That's a 686% winning percentage. He has 7 victories to his credit in World Series. And only, I think Whitey Ford has 10, I think. And so he's right up there with them. He threw 2 no-hitters in 1951. He was the first Oklahoma State baseball player to sign a professional contract with Cleveland Indians. And he was also unknown. He was also drafted in the 3rd round by the NFL New York Giants, but turned them down. He wanted to play baseball. He was at OSU on a track scholarship. He ran the 100-yard dash in 9.8 seconds. That's fast. 9.8. Back in those days, they had those big old Herman Munster shoes, and they ran on cinder track. He ran a 9.8. And also threw the javelin. And as Mark pointed out, they named the baseball field at Oklahoma State in his honor. Now, he also, if you ever go to Bricktown that the Chickasaws own now, they have a statue of Allie Reynolds there. He's a Muskogee Creek, grew up in Bethany, Oklahoma. He was inducted into the American Indian Athletic Hall of Fame in 1972. Another guy that I got to meet his family and just talk about him with everything that they had told me and so forth. There's a movement to get Pete Rose in Baseball Hall of Fame, and to get Allie Reynolds, a Creek boy, in the Hall of Fame. I don't know that it's going to happen. I don't know, but there's a movement. And if it ever gets to the point of signing the petition, I'll certainly make that available here. And because that's, some of you guys still remember those things. Choctaw boy, Cal McLish. 44 to 58 is when he played. He played the Brooklyn Dodgers, Pittsburgh Pirates, Chicago Cubs, Cleveland Indians. He was a strong arm hurler. Even, his one-loss record, it's like a lot of them, but he won 35 games in over 7 or 8 seasons and he had 40 losses. In his final year, 1958, he was third in major leagues with the earned run average and so forth. But another ball player I need to mention, a guy named Pepper Martin, Osage guy. Man, he was with a Gas House gang in the 30s with the St. Louis Cardinals. This was a team from Jay in Uchi, Oklahoma, 1906. Those are our kinfolk, them boys back there, the guy on the end and the fourth one. Those are my great uncles. Those are our great uncles. That's my grandma's half brothers. Oh, look at the field they're playing on. Dad, gone. Imagine trying to play ball. But I'm going to throw that in. They're not major leaguers, but they were to a lot of people. That they provided that Sunday afternoon, like many of us grew up and so forth. Any questions?
I'm going to make a comment.
How about?
We really appreciate you bringing to light that Jackie Robinson was not the person that broke the color barrier. And and it takes somebody with research and data and the foresight to do what you just did. Not everyone will get up and tell the story like you did. And let us know that, hey, our Native Americans were out there in the forefront in many ways, and I just appreciate that. I learned a lot today.
Well, no.
Baseball was our way of life as we were growing up.
Yeah, I think all of us.
Our communities.
Mm-hmm.
We kept our communities intact by baseball because it was all a family deal. Our families would go visit Flute Springs and go to Greeley and Night Cut, and it was an all-day deal.
It's a community event, wasn't it?
Community event, and that's what kept us intact. It wasn't going out and picking out the best ball players from each community. It was staying within your boundaries. But that was good, Rob. We really appreciate what you did.
Yes.
In your research, did you find out why the majors were more accepting of natives, not blacks?
I think part of it is that because we weren't black, they were aware of black ball players. Believe me, they had Negro leagues. They were aware of black ball players. And I think it was at a time also, too, we were seen as a nice novelty. We were non-threatening. We were someone to yell for because of what happened to our people in the past. They saw that as a way of kind of reducing that dark past that with the United States, and they were accepting of our ball players. But it wasn't all like that. Even Allie Reynolds says that they had to stay at a different hotel when they got to Philadelphia. I didn't come across anything in my research why natives were more accepted rather than blacks. I don't know. That's a good one. I think it's that romance level, kind of like the Hollywood romance that they were natives. And of course, you have a guy named Yellow Horse. You're not going to say anything bad because he's one of your best ball players. So you fall in love with that idea of native ball players. And of course, they had schools like Haskell, which I didn't mention. A lot of these guys went to Haskell. They went to all these guys, different Indian schools they went to. Haskell, you had Stewart, Nevada, Chilocco, and again, Carlisle, where a lot of these guys went. So they were aware of our native baseball players, and they were very good ball players. So you don't really say anything, of your good ball players. I just happen to think because of the romance type, if that makes sense, accepting natives, because the opening of Jackie Robinson led the charge, but all the Indian people made it possible for guys like Jackie Robinson to play too, because at least that color barrier was broken. And so anytime, if you have ever sports personality say that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball, smack him and correct him, because he was not. Now, Lord knows he went through hell being a black ball player. And of course, if you saw that movie, Jackie Robinson, it's pretty much true. And the research I've dug up on that, Will, is a lot of the Indian ball players from yells and taunts from the stands, where it was a lot similar to that. Well, folks, that's it. I enjoyed it. It's only just the God's dealers.